Hey Guardians, I just want to let everyone know that I do have both a Twitch and a Twitter, and I'm very active on both. Feel free to come give me a follow on both, links in the description. So, it's not exactly a secret that 180 hand cannons have been on the struggle bus for a long time, both in PvE and particularly in PvP. In fact, I've never bothered reviewing a 180 because they always just seemed like a waste of time, but sometimes, if nothing else, a weapon being fun or interesting does make it worth talking about, so today we're taking a look at Sightline Survey, the hand cannon from Echoes. And while this hand cannon is still on that same struggle bus as other 180s, it does have one specific role that makes it intriguing. This is probably going to be a shorter review as there isn't a ton to say on this weapon, plus most of our seasonal weapons don't have much that makes them particularly interesting or potent, so the ones that I do review will probably have shorter reviews. So starting with PvP, here's the issue with 180 hand cannons. They have a slow base TTK requiring 2 crits and 2 body shots for a 1-second TTK. They have awful handling and terrible range. 180s haven't been good since we lost the 180 version of Not Forgotten and Luna's Howl with OG Mag Howl, which would allow them to 3-tap natively and potentially even 2-tap. But since we lost all that, 180s just haven't been worthwhile in PvP, plus they feel horrific on mouse and keyboard. The only real use they've had is for kill chaining, but given that there are other weapons that are just better for rapid kill chaining and there are still ways to build into certain 140s and 120s for kill chaining, they're a hard sell. And with that aside, given that the main identity of hand cannons is dueling and 140s and 120s are just better for that, most PvP players just ignore 180s completely, myself included. But Sightline Survey does kind of change this, with a huge emphasis on the kind of part. So, jumping into roles, I would prioritize range here. 180s really struggle with range, but due to their archetype, they are very controllable, so stability isn't as much of an issue here. So, for your barrel and mag, go with hammer-forged rifling and accurized rounds, then range for your masterwork. This will give you a range stat of 64 with 32 meters of reach, and that will at least give you enough range to contest most 140 hand cannons and other mid-range weapons that sit in a similar range bracket. Now moving on to that third column, you have To the Pain, Enlightened Action, Air Trigger, Fragile Focus, and Keep Away. Again, given that these weapons are range starved, I would stick to Keep Away or Fragile Focus. Fragile Focus does give a more substantial range boost of 20, but if your shields are broken, you will lose that range bonus, so for that reason, Keep Away is my top pick here. Plus 10 range, plus 20 reload speed, and a weapon accuracy boost as long as no enemies are within close proximity to you. Then in the fourth column, Eye of the Storm, Desperate Measures, Encore, Precision Instrument, Opening Shot, and Kill Clip. Now the main appeal here really is Precision Instrument, where landing shots will give you a slight damage boost every time you hit your target. This means that Sightline Survey does have some potential as a dueling weapon. At base, Precision Instrument will allow you to 3 crit anyone under around 6 resilience. Above that, and you're back at that 2 crit and 2 body mark. Now 3 crits with a 180 is a TTK of 0.67 seconds, which is a substantial drop from the usual 1 second. The main issue here, of course, is resilience gating. Fighting Guardians above 6 resilience is not uncommon at all these days, so if you want that consistent TTK, you'll need to find a way to boost your damage, meaning you'll have to build into the weapon. Now there are ways you can do this, of course, such as Radiant Dodge on Hunter, but I actually opted for Mask of Bacchus, as when I dodge, Bacchus will give me a damage boost to my arc weapons. Then on top of that, I used Reaper to create orbs on a kill after a dodge, then arc surges so that I could pick up that orb and keep my damage up. So the basic idea here was just to dodge immediately before a gunfight, get a kill, Reaper creates an orb, pick up the orb to proc my surges, so on and so forth. So the question is, does all that for a faster TTK on this weapon make it worth using over a 140 or a 120? And I would say the answer is probably not. If you're on a controller, this will be a bit more viable than on M&K, since 180s do have a reputation for feeling better on controller, but on M&K they still feel horrific, and Sightline Survey doesn't change this. The main issue, I would say, is really just the recoil animation, which is something that I talked about in my Luna's Howl review, as it has the same recoil as a 180. I do hope this gets adjusted in the future so that on M&K at least the recoil feels a bit more like a 120 or a 140, because that by itself would make 180s much more usable on M&K. But that aside, while it does give you that very nice 0.67 TTK, the reality is that 140s and 120s can still 3-tap natively, and they have an overall higher ease of use than a 180. So I'd say the main appeal there is to this roll is that it's just fun. Normally I find 180s to just feel miserable to use, but I actually had a lot of fun during my time with Sightline Survey. Would I take it into Trials or Comp? Absolutely not, but in 6s it's a good time. Building into that consistent precision instrument 3-tap and creating a gameplay loop around it can make for kind of a fun minigame, but outside of having fun, Sightline Survey's usefulness is severely limited. Now, of course, if you wanted to just go for a kill chaining roll, then there are plenty of options there that will make it easier to 3-tap after a kill than trying to build into precision instrument. I would for sure still go with Keep Away in the 3rd column, but in the 4th column you could go with Kill Clip or Desperate Measures, and they'll just do a better job of securing that 3-tap. But even then, there are better 180s out there for that purpose, such as Posterity or even the Crucible 180 you can get from Shaxx's Legacy Pool. And regardless, none of this helps the fact that 180s just do not have the stats to keep up with other hand cannons, and they genuinely just feel awful to use. So 180s still just need some love in general from Bungie before I can recommend them for anything other than just messing around in 6s. At the very least, 180s need a range buff, and at least on M&K they need to have their recoil animation changed. Those two things would help these weapons out a ton. Now, all this isn't to say that you can't use a 180. There are players out there who are practically married to them and who are extremely lethal and effective with them. A perfect example of this is Dramatic Cape, who you can find on Twitter and YouTube. They use a 180 with Golden Tricorn and they're extremely lethal with it. But for most players, meaning just your average Destiny 2 PvP player, these things are dead on arrival. Now for PvE, you do have some options here, but even then, Sightline Survey is pretty mid. Obviously, any damage perks will be okay for ad clear, but obviously the main choice here is Volt Shot. The problem is Volt Shot really isn't as potent as I'd like it to be, and to be honest, as far as I'm concerned, the new Raid Bow having Volt Shot has rendered pretty much all other Volt Shot primaries useless, as there's something to be said about proccing Volt Shot automatically without even having to think about it and having what is essentially a legendary Trinity Ghoul. That being said, if you really want to rock Sightline Survey and PvE, then I would go with either Strategist for class ability energy on kills, or a perk that will boost your reload speed such as Keep Away or Enlightened Action, and the damage perk of your choosing. And with the Origin trait, the weapon will create a small pool of Radiolaria on the ground after multi-kills, which will burn anything that walks through them, which is okay, but nothing too crazy. Again, the main use here is this is just a fun weapon to use, but there are certainly better PvE primaries out there. Sunshot, the Raid Bow, so on and so forth, it's a long list. What I will say is that it's a very nice looking and nice sounding hand cannon, but its performance leaves a lot to be desired, which is more the fault of its archetype than anything else. Hopefully 180s do get some love in the future. That is really all I have to say on Sightline Survey. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, then do me a favor and hit that like button and leave me a comment with your thoughts on this weapon. And as always, the best way you can support this channel is to subscribe with the bell icon and share this video with anyone who you think might find it helpful or entertaining. For now, I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, Guardians.